Hollywood is a place for dreamers. If you don't, even at my crotchety old age, if I sit down to start a new spec screenplay, I have to think this one's going to get made and this one's going to be great. Or a pilot, this is going to be great. If you don't have that, stop, move aside, let somebody else take a shot at it.
All right, this is the Story Series podcast where we tell the stories behind the people. Andy Guerdat, welcome.
Thank you. Happy to be with you here in beautiful Santa Clarita.
Yes. I am thrilled that you're here. As is customary, I just read a little introduction just for people who might not know who you are.
Oh, I'm sure there are a few who don't know who I am.
You are a writer and a producer whose fingerprints have been on countless shows over the years. Just to name a very select few, Mork Mindy, Sister Sister, Head of the Class, to recent animated shows like Paw Patrol, Fancy Nancy, Robogobo, which is how we met.
Yep.
All that is to say, welcome. I'm so excited to dig into all that with you.
Okay. Me too.
Yeah.
See if I can remember.
Well, I just as a way to get to know you a little bit better, I like to go back and start with origin stories.
Okay.
So if you could, where did you grow up?
I was born in Buffalo, New York, but I grew up in Birmingham, Alabama, of all places. The two places probably as far removed from show business as it's possible to be. So yeah, Birmingham, Alabama in the 1960s, which was an education in and of itself.
Birmingham. I remember the Randy Newman song, Birmingham.
It was just like that. No,
Get him, Dan. Yeah.
It was, it was an unusual place to grow up. I didn't really like it much. I had friends there and I liked parts of it, the South. But I wasn't really a Southerner. We were from the North, so I never felt like we really fit in.
Even as a kid, you felt like
I had friends, but as I got older, it was a very socially oppressive place. There was only one right way to be, and you were either that or you were out. There were no subcultures at that time anyway. Maybe it's changed. I don't know. But anyway, I didn't fit in. I was this kind of artistic-y kid, and it wasn't really a place for me. Or if there was, it was very marginalized. So I knew pretty early on I wanted to get out of there, and I was intrigued by, I wanted to tell stories. I liked telling stories. I used to draw comic books for my friends and write stories. And if there was ever something that needed to be written, they would always give it to me to write. And so I knew I liked that. So it was just a question of where and when and how I was going to get out of there.
Yeah.
And,
but going back, I was going to say you were always creatively inclined.
Oh, yeah.
You had that bug early on.
Yeah.
Anything else that you ever had your ambitions kind of
I was lucky that a sex worker, is that what you said? No, I did not want to be I tried. But that's a tough racket.
Tough market out there in Birmingham.
Especially in Birmingham. No, I was lucky that way. I knew pretty early on. I like telling stories. And now that I've gotten, to be this age, I've been a working writer for 45 years, for God's sake. But I've realized that that's the best way to approach it. I'm a storyteller. When I have to fill out an application for that, I put in writer or TV writer, but I'm really a storyteller, and that means, it doesn't really matter whether it's prose or TV or movies or TV movies or whatever it might be. You can change the medium, but I'm a storyteller, and I knew that early on.
Yeah, and what were your influences early on? What were you taking in? What about it were you looking at saying, I want to be a part of that?
It's hard to say. I knew... my dad was, there's nobody in my family in show business anywhere at all for going back. You can go back hundreds of years. But he did want to be a writer. He was of that generation, that World War II generation that came out of the war and wanted to write a novel. And he was that guy.
Like the Norman Mailer
kind
of.
They all wanted to do that. And he was a funny guy. He was very funny in a weird, abstract way. So not like dad jokes funny, like actually funny. And introduced me to Mel Brooks and to Nichols and May and Bob and Ray and Ernie Kovacs and these really inventive, abstract comic minds back when nobody did that. I mean, in Birmingham anyway.
So he had taste.
Very much so.
I mean, Nichols and May, where did were they on TV at the time? I know they were on
No, and
stage.
that's what's even weirder. I don't know how, but they would be on the radio sometimes. I guess he knew certain programs or something, but they would be on the radio or else albums. Lots of comedy albums in those days. And so,
So he was very much, despite, and maybe I'm stereotyping a little bit, but despite being in Birmingham, it seemed very worldly, very aware of what was outside.
Oh, very much so, but unusual for that time. Of course, he wasn't raised in Birmingham. He was raised in Buffalo, but it's not exactly, Manhattan. But he was aware. He was much more aware. He'd been in the service. He'd been, been overseas, and he was just a smart, funny guy. Still, I think back on stuff he did that was like, that was really weird and funny. When I was in college, he used to send me letters, but he would go to the drugstore and get like one of those cards that says "Happy Birthday 1-year-old" with a ducky on it or something. So I'd be embarrassed when I opened it. And then he would write whatever he was going to write. When he got to the end of the card, he just stopped writing. There was no sign off, so you'd turn away. Wait, what? It was weird stuff like that. That's weirdly funny.
That is.
It is
I
funny,
really like that, and especially to not have lost that, even when you're in college, he's still trying to make you laugh, still being a little weird in a good way.
So he was, I guess, my major influence in terms of that, and who he introduced me to. And when I was a teenager, we used to go back and forth between Buffalo and Birmingham every summer to visit relatives, and he would try to stop. We would drive, and he would take us to interesting places along the way. And then he finally took me, the family, to Manhattan, to New York, and I had just learned who Woody Allen was. I'd listened to a couple of comedy albums, and he took us to see Play It Again, Sam on Broadway, and it completely changed my life as to, you can be this kind of weird, nerdy kid, and that's a thing. I could do that. I could try to do that. And changed my life completely.
And you were in high school when you saw that on?
Yeah. I would have been about 15 or 16.
Wow. I know. I mean, we share a love for Woody Allen. And I know that he later turned that into a film, Played Again, Sam. He didn't direct it, but he was very, that was, but was he in
he was in it, yeah.
The stage play?
Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah. Wow. Diane Keaton and all these people, before anybody knew who she was, certainly.
Right.
And he was not that well known at the time. He was sort of a kind of a late night talk show phenomenon and a stand-up comedian. Whatever else he may or may not have done in his personal life. He was just a brilliant artist who mastered so many different forms. And I just said, that's what I want to do. That's that thing there. Yeah. I think I can do that.
And were your parents encouraging of that direction?
To the degree they knew about it, I think so. My dad died. He was young. I was 21 when he died. So I guess he may have known I had ambitions, but I certainly hadn't left the house and I hadn't succeeded at anything. So, and my mom was very supportive, and she swears it's not true, but I know when I got in my little Volkswagen Squareback and headed out to California, she knew I'd be back in a week. And she had to, but the fact that I succeeded, I think, shocked her, but she won't admit it.
So then when you were in high school, what were you trying to, what was your post-high school plan? Where did you
I had no
think
plan.
you were going to, no plan.
There's no plan. I just think there's a place called Hollywood. And I can remember I had to decide, do I want to go to New York, which is publishing and theater, or do I want to go to LA, which is movies and television? And it really came down to, in the mid-1970s, when I worked my little blue-collar jobs and saved enough money to go somewhere. It was just that New York was so scary, especially in the 70s. And New York would have eaten me alive. I would have been dead. But LA somehow seemed more manageable, and it was. I fit in pretty quickly. I found my way pretty quickly.
And did you just decided that to drive cross country?
Brandon, I knew nobody west of the Mississippi. We didn't have a family friend who was the cousin of a brother of a janitor at Paramount. I didn't know anybody. And I just loaded up the truck and moved to Beverly. I mean, I had to try. I had to go. I couldn't be in Birmingham anymore.
And what did you come out with? Did you have any script samples?
I had started, I had written a spec MASH. In those days, not so much anymore, but then you would write a spec episode of an existing TV show to show that you could write. And so I picked MASH, which was a hot show at the time.
Yeah.
And I had no idea what I was doing. Remember, there's no internet. So I had to go to the downtown public library in Birmingham, and there was one book called Writing for Television that I found. I don't remember who wrote it, and it was not great, but it was something. And it just gave me a crude idea of what a script might look like. And I wrote the spec MASH, and once I got out here and I started taking classes at a little, doesn't exist anymore, film school called Sherwood Oaks Experimental College. It was kind of a hippy-dippy 1970s film school, and it was really great. It was awesome. And I took writing and directing and acting classes there. And once I got started, I realized, okay, there's things wrong with this script that I'd written. I was writing it in Birmingham with no guidance whatsoever, but it was basically kind of there. I had the act breaks in the right spot, and I had an instinct for what a story sort of felt like, and the jokes were not wrong and not bad. And I used that, I rewrote it, of course, but I used that as the basis for the spec script that wound up getting me an agent and getting me work.
Going back to leaving home.
Yeah.
Did it at all occur to you how brave that move was? Or did you was it just sights ahead, I'm going out, and you almost didn't know what you were getting into?
I had
in a good way. In a
good way. If anybody had told me, oh, no, this is not what you think, dummy. If they'd actually said, no, you're going to have to learn how to pitch stories, and you're going to have to learn how to, negotiate the social elements of it, I'd have turned around and gone back. I had no idea what I was walking into. But it was the motivation was pure desperation. I just could not stand being in Birmingham. I love my family, and I had friends, but most of my friends had gone off or somewhere else anyway. And there was just no life for me there. I tried, writing little short stories and things. And I wanted to be a cartoonist for a while. And I did single panel cartoons, and I'd send them off to places, and it was hopeless. And I could see this is ridiculous. If I'm going to do it, you have to go where the work is, where people are actually doing this for a living.
Yeah.
But I had no idea what I was walking into.
When you first arrived, what did you find in terms of stereotypes about LA that were true, and what surprised you about being here?
Yeah, it was mostly surprises, I have to say, pleasant surprises. Somehow I had an image of LA physically as being this big flat expanse where all the houses look the same, and there are areas like that. But where I got a little apartment in Hollywood, was right at it was still kind of a rough area, but it was right where it started to go up into the Hollywood Hills, and you could walk 2 blocks up in the hills, and you're where movie stars live, and then 2 blocks the other way you get stabbed. So it was great. I thought,
still kind of like that, right?
Oh yeah, it still is. And Hollywood keeps changing, but not that much. It's always been kind of rough around the edges, and I always liked that. As far as the business part of it goes, yeah, I mean, at the time, I was pleasantly surprised by most of the people I met. Really wanted to do good work. We all got sidetracked, and we all stubbed our toes or worse. But most of the people I worked with then, I don't know if it's the same now for people coming into the business, but people wanted to do good work. It was the system, or the lack of a system, that prevented them and us from doing good work. It still does, as you may know.
It's always a battle, right?
It's always a battle with the forces of stupidity of the people who run the studios and run the production companies, having no idea what they're doing. They truly it's as if you were. It's like we're working for a patio furniture company, and the CEO doesn't know what a table is. They don't know anything, and yet they're pretending like they do. That's the thing that's infuriating. I wouldn't say I was surprised by it, because we've all seen Hollywood movies about the abusive producers and stuff like that. But they were just so dumb, and they still are. Probably dumber now.
Just a random memory of, I know you taught at UCLA Extension
Yes.
years and years later. So I took 2 classes there. One was Antoine Fisher's screenwriting class.
Okay.
And I don't know if you know who he is, but
I know. I actually met Antoine. Yes.
Okay, yeah. So
he said it in one of my classes to learn how to teach. And then,
oh, how funny! Well, he passed that on to us because I took his class, and he was fantastic. And for those who don't know, there's a movie with Denzel Washington based on his life. It's called Antoine Fisher. It's based on a memoir, and this memory is that he grew up in such poverty that when he was pitching his story to to movie studio executives, none of them believed it was true.
Yeah.
Because of the way they were raised.
Yes.
They had no idea that someone could live
Yes.
like this. So to your point about the forces of stupidity or whatever, that disconnect, you don't know what a table is.
Yeah, exactly. It's one of the surprises is that you think of these people as being in the positions of power. You think of them as being wealthy, and the people at the top, of course, are the David Zaslavs of the world, who are just raking in money for being idiots. But the people below them, the next levels down, aren't really making big salaries. And so the only people who can afford to take those jobs are the children of the wealthy and powerful. And so you constantly would realize, oh my God, that's so-and-so's kid. And so they know nothing, and they're not making a lot of money. So that's who you wind up dealing with, these kind of overprivileged people who grew up in a bubble. I remember pitching a pilot, which we sold at the time, but pitching it to NBC, and the two executives, I won't name them, but they're children of wealthy, powerful people in the business, and it was a family story. It was a kind of Roseanne kind of lower middle class environment. That was part of the thing, is that they didn't have a lot of money. And so our pilot story was going to be about them having a garage sale, and we'd structured out the story. They're short of, they need $500, they can't make the mortgage, and they have to have a garage sale. And they listened to our story, and then I remember they said, oh, well, let's start here. First of all, nobody cares about money. And secondly, I mean, everybody's got $500. It's like, and how do you try to keep the top of your head from exploding because these people are so stupid. And this was just before Roseanne came on the scene. And I can remember listening, I think it may even have been those same executives, but being in a room with executives when Roseanne premiered and them saying, oh my God, did you see that show? Oh my God, their living room is hideous. Who's going to want to watch that? It's like, well, everybody is, you moron, because that's their life. That's who's watching. They had no idea who their audience was. They still don't. They're as dumb as they ever were.
You come out armed with this MASH spec
Yeah.
script
Oh,
that
boy.
you're punching up based on exposure, learning to the community here. So what do you set out to do? And did you specifically have your sights set on television?
No.
Or was it just...
No, people of my generation wanted to be screenwriters. I came out here, I wanted to be Steven Spielberg. I wanted to be Robert Towne. I wanted to be a big screenwriter. Remember in the mid-'70s, well, you don't remember, maybe you do, but the 70s, the decade of the 70s was probably Hollywood's golden age. You had this every Friday, a movie or two would be released that were not just good, they were life-changingly good. You'd walk out of Chinatown, you'd walk out of The Conversation, Godfather 2, Annie Hall. You just walk out of these movies and say, wow, I didn't know a movie could do that. And so that's what I wanted to do. I had, I watched television and I liked some of it. Certainly there were also by that point, there were some pretty good shows. MASH, Mary Tyler Moore's show, All in the Family. There were certainly some good shows, but that wasn't my intent. I just started doing television because that's where the work was.
Yeah.
And I wound up doing some movie work, but I never really had a movie career. I made some money, but and I had also wrote an original screenplay at that same time when I had first come out, and it was like a detective thriller, and it wound up getting me a lot of work. I got a lot of rewrite work.
Is it a feature spec?
It was a feature, yeah.
So, okay.
And I got a lot of rewrite work. I sort of got my toes into the screenwriting business. Unfortunately, the movie business changed right about the time I started getting some traction, and it suddenly stopped being what it was in the 70s, what I wanted to do. I wanted to do the next Chinatown. And by that point, in the early 80s, they weren't interested in the next Chinatown. I wrote a spec screenplay called Chavez Ravine, which was my Chinatown, but it was it was about the scandals involved in moving the Brooklyn Dodgers to Los Angeles in the 1950s. I think there's a podcast now with John Hamm about the same kind of a fictional version of the same thing. Anyway, it got a lot of attention, but De Niro was circling it for a while, but it was just the wrong timing. It was by that point it was the mid '80s, and
That's
people
when the
corporations
bought
took
all the
over.
movie studios. And
Yeah, and it was just it started to become what it is now,
Right.
which is they don't really make movies anymore. They exploit brands, which is a different thing, and it wasn't quite as bad then, but it still wasn't. It wasn't the '70s where every time out people were trying to make a masterpiece, and they were supported by the movie studios because the studios by that point didn't know what the audience wanted. If you want Chinatown, we'll try to give you Chinatown, and so they were supportive of these great filmmakers, Spielberg and Coppola and Lucas and De Palma and Scorsese and these great filmmakers, Woody Allen, and they made some masterpieces. They hold up now. You can't believe it now when you look back on the typical movies from the mid '70s or even the late '70s. My God, all those movies were made in 1 year. If one of them were made now, it'd be a miracle. Anyway, that's what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
And then I wound up doing Sister, which is very close to Annie Hall, but not quite.
Right. Well, so this manuscript, but you said that this got you, was it your first job?
It got me an agent. And
Got you an agent.
But yeah, I was working with a partner at that time, but we got lots of work. He helped me rewrite it, and we got a lot of work off of it for years.
Was it, what kind of work was it? Freelance scripts? Or
Yeah.
Okay.
In those days, that's not the case anymore. TV business changed an enormous amount since I was started out. But in those days, yeah, you could make a living as a freelancer, especially if you lived the way I lived, But if you sold 2 or 3 scripts a year, you could survive, and it was normal for a typical show, which had usually an episode commitment of 22 episodes for a season. 5, 6, 7 of them would be freelance, and if you got one of those, and then the other thing is because there were only 3 networks, they used to rerun. Almost every network show would rerun, and so you'd get, I think it was a hefty percentage on that first rerun. So if you did an episode of a hit show, you would get the payment, and then usually you'd get a good residual payment, and you could live that way. So I freelanced for 4 years before I finally got on staff.
And what was your first staff?
Archie Bunker's Place,
Archie
which
Bunker's
was the
Place.
spin-off of All in the Family.
Yep.
And that was that was a very educational experience. It wasn't a great show, but it was run, again, things have changed. In those days, when you were a young punk like I was in my late 20s by that point, and you were always working for guys who, at the very least, were in their 40s, but often in their 50s or 60s. They were old pros who were the showrunners. That absolutely doesn't happen anymore. I mean, with rare exceptions, anybody past 50, man, you better be a big star or else you're out. And
I mean, it's all about the young showrunner,
totally
the young star show.
Yes, ageism is outrageous. But anyway, I learned from these guys who are these older guys, and they were of a different generation. These were guys who many of them were playwrights, novelists. They were often New Yorkers who are doing this. They're slumming a little bit. Oh, TV money is pretty good. I guess I'll do it. And so they were the guys I learned from. And on Archie Bunker's Place, it was run by, originally at any rate, it was run by these old pros. And I was part of this cadre of younger writers who were brought in to try to liven it up a little bit. And so it was a very interesting experience. And Carol O'Connor was, of course, this icon.
Yeah.
So my first staff job, by that point, he owned the show. Norman Lear had almost nothing to do with it anymore. And Carol owned like half the show, and he was the showrunner, which is unheard of. The star was so when there
I was
was
going to say, yeah.
punch up night, rewrite night, you're pitching to Carol O'Connor. If you've got a joke, you're pitching to Carol. You're pitching to Archie Bunker. His chair was in the Smithsonian Institution at that point. So it was like
It was at that point?
oh yeah, it was
gosh.
already there. So it's like how daunting it can be when you're pitching jokes in a rewrite room with any showrunner can be kind of, scary. And if they want to be, they can be prickly. And this was that times 100. And I remember it took me several weeks before I had the nerve to pitch a joke. And it went well. And I can still remember the look on his face because, people, comedy writers are famous for not laughing at each other's jokes necessarily, but he wasn't like a big laugher. But I pitched the joke, and it was clearly better than what was in the script. It was.
What did you pitch?
Do you really want to know this joke?
Yes.
Okay, I have to set it up.
Please.
Okay, so it was a scene. It wasn't my script. It was a story, and Archie was running this bar, and he was always suing people or getting sued because he's such a terrible businessman. He was always offending people and getting sued or suing someone. So he had these attorneys, these low-rent attorneys who were sort of on retainer, constantly dealing with his legal problems. It's called the Rabinowitz family, and they're like a local Brooklyn, whatever. And so it was a scene where he goes to the office of these attorneys, and the older attorney, who's sick of dealing with him, is going to fob him off on this young attorney, right? Because nobody wants to deal with Archie. And so the scene was Archie coming into the office, and the guy's supposed to wave to a chair, but the younger attorney's already sitting in the chair that Archie usually sits in, and so Archie almost sits on him, right? So he's like almost sits in his lap, and then there was just a little dialogue that said, the older attorney said, you know Mr. Bunker, don't you? And the younger attorney just had a line like, yes, or something. Yes, sir, hello, or whatever. And I said, I think we could better that. And when you say that in a rewrite room, the guy who wrote the script was sitting across from me, gives me a look like, you little punk, you better have something. Don't say you can better my line unless you can do it. So it's like, nobody's going to help you out. You better have something. So I said, so what if the guy almost sits on him, and the older attorney says, you know Mr. Bunker, don't you? And the younger attorney says, well, not from that angle, which is, better than hello, right? It's not a great joke, but
not from that angle.
So Carol kind of smiles, okay, and he turns to the writer's assistant. In those days, they did it by hand. It means it goes in the script for tomorrow's rehearsal. And that was it. It was like, okay, I can do this. Whew. But that's a daunting way. That's a daunting way to break in, because usually you're not pitching to the star of the show, much less a star who is so powerful,
iconic, powerful, and you're getting live feedback.
Yeah,
you'll know instantly by his face.
Oh, for sure. And he had no problem. Trust me, Carol had no problem telling you if he hated something. I saw him throw scripts across the room when he didn't like a table read. And if you dared to put in the script, if he wrote in beat or pause or something, he would flip out. He said, I'm the actor. I'll figure out where the beats are. Just write me something we're saying. And he had no difficulty telling you if he didn't like your work. I did okay on that show. I lasted 3 years, so it was a good gig.
And what did that do for you? I mean, obviously for your career, that's a huge break to get a staff, right?
Oh, yeah.
But for you personally?
Well, it just meant I could do it. And also because the show was more grounded, I had just come off of Mork Mindy, which could not be sillier.
I was going to say this is a wildly different tone.
Wildly different tone. And that was, I had done 2.5, story, one story, and then 2. I did the story and teleplay. But
any indication that Robin Williams was something special?
Oh, everybody knew right away. The show was explosively popular the first season, and then they started monkeying with it. The geniuses, the dumbbells, started, we need more. It has have more youth appeal. So they started throwing in these characters had nothing to do with Robin being an alien. It was completely off, and then we had to service these other characters, and it was like, what are you doing? They ruined the show really quickly.
If it's successful, let's fix it. It's like, what?
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's true, because everybody wants to get their fingerprints on something successful so that they can pretend they did something. And in this case, it was a silly show to start with, but it probably could have lasted longer. They killed it. It barely made it through 4 seasons. But yes, to answer your question, you knew immediately Robin was this. When you went to a taping, it was a Gary Marshall production, and Gary would put a lot of effort into the actual live studio audience thing. And so they had a warm-up guy, which almost everybody did for the audience, but they also had a little band, like a 3-person band who would play on a little stage off to the side in between scenes, because there's sometimes a fairly long wait for the audience just to keep them entertained. And Robin would do the scene, then run up to into the audience, grab the mic from the warm-up guy, do some of his act, give it back to him, go up with the band, play drums with the band, run back down, do the next scene for 3-4 hours straight. Now, since then, we've learned that he probably was helped in this endeavor by some substances. But even so, it was an astounding thing to see. He was clearly this amazing, amazing talent that once in a generation. And it was interesting at the time, people, even in the business, would say, well, you wrote Mork Mindy, what did you write? Because it was, he was so famous for improvising. Everybody just, people assumed he improvised everything. He did not improvise everything. The rule of thumb was he had to do it as written once, and then the second take or pickups he could improvise. And sometimes his improvisations were brilliant and made it in. Much of the time they were just weird non sequiturs, so that if you put it in the final cut, the audience at home would have just said, what?
Right. You have to make sure you hit the story beats.
Yeah, we have to know he was supposed to say this before that makes any sense.
Yeah.
And so probably what you saw in the air was 80-90% what was written, because the writers learned how to write to his voice. And I learned how he spoke. I learned how he improvised.
That's interesting, because just thinking Carol O'Connor and Robin Williams.
I know.
Very funny. Very funny. Wildly. And you, we'll put up the links, but you have a YouTube channel called The Go Draft.
The Go Draft. Yeah.
And in one of your videos, I mean, it's full of just great resources for writers. But you mentioned comedy as a language. And I'm just thinking of, the word comedy applies to Robin Williams, Carol O'Connor, but it couldn't be
more different.
Yeah, but here you are, your first couple jobs, and you're writing for this soon to be icon, and then someone who's already established.
Yeah,
I mean that's. But you had a knack for it.
Well,
clearly.
yeah, and you have to if you want to survive in television. It was baptism by fire, but it's what you have to do. You have to shift gears. You're almost never going to be writing your material. You're always trying to write someone else's character, someone else's situation. And certainly when you're starting out, eventually maybe you're lucky you get a pilot on the air, and then you can write what you want to write. But even then, you can't most of the time.
You have to write for the actor. I mean, you're writing for it to be spoken.
You're writing for it to be spoken and performed.
As
Tom Stoppard says, it's not a text, it's an event. And that took me a long time. He said, it looks so funny on the page, but if they can't make it funny on the stage, nobody cares. And so that was a real lesson. It took years to figure that one out. It's trial and error, and you realize, that was funny on the page, but when it's spoken, the audience doesn't laugh because it's not in character, or it's off story, or it's not, it's not in the right attitude at that moment, or whatever the reason is. So yeah, it was a great way to learn how to write. Very silly, very broad. There's a story, but one of those old school producers had a great way of explaining it to me and my partner, because we'd written some draft in an Archie Bunker's episode that was too silly for his taste. And he said, guys, this is funny, but it's wrong. And he said, here's the rule of thumb. On those shows, like Mork Mindy, Mork Mindy, he'd say, on those shows, you ask yourself, is this possible? And if the answer is yes, then it's fine, you go ahead. But on our show, you ask yourself, is this probable? Is this what would probably happen? And if the answer is no, they probably wouldn't say that, then you have to stop. You can't use that joke. Possible isn't good enough. Yes, Archie could possibly do this, but would he probably do this? No, he probably wouldn't. Therefore, you can't use that joke, no matter how funny it is. Go back and find something he would probably do and make it special, make it interesting, make it funny. And Carol was very much that way. Carol was a serious actor. I mean, a very well-trained actor, Shakespearean-level actor. And so it had to be grounded in truth, or he wasn't going to say those words.
That's amazingly put. So then when Archie Bunker's Place comes to an end, then now you have a little more in your arsenal as a TV writer.
Yeah.
But, I was talking to someone else here recently about how often you have to start over in the industry. Looking back, looking at your career, it's an amazing ride, and it looks consistent looking backwards.
Oh, yeah.
But how was it at that time looking forward?
My God. I started over really almost from scratch at least 3 times. At least 3 times, and then other times where there were bumps in the road, and I had to. But I wrote with a partner when I first came. I met a guy, and we were sort of simpatico, and I needed emotional support at that point. It was very difficult for me to walk into a room by myself and pitch. I really needed to be with a partner, and we were very successful. And we worked together for, I think, 13 years. And then he was getting sick of the business, and I was sort of tired of, he'd come into the office and we were working on a show, and he'd go to sleep on the sofa, and it's like, wait a minute. I get it. You don't want to be here. But anyway, so we broke up after we had a particularly unpleasant experience on the fabulous Saved by the Bell, the college years, which is the primetime version of Saved by the Bell, which was a miserable experience. And so after that, I said, I have to change. And he didn't like the business anymore. So he retired anyway. So I had to start all over. I wrote a spec Frasier, that was a hot show at the time.
Right, because now we're talking about, we're in the 90s now.
Yeah, and I had to show I could write without him. And so I had to sit down and write a spec Frasier. And then that worked for me, and I worked solo for about 7 years. And then at a certain point, I lasted until my mid-40s, which is for a sitcom writer, that's pretty good. But you're still in your mid-40s. I'm nowhere near retirement. What am I supposed to do? I got a family and a mortgage. And so the doors just closed on everybody. You hit your mid-40s, the Iron Gate
Is that true?
came down.
That's really
Absolutely true. I don't know what it's like now, because the whole sitcom business is not really what it used to be. But in those days, if you were especially a comedy writer, you were done. No, and there was a major lawsuit, a class action lawsuit, and I was part of it, against the major studios, networks, and agencies for ageism. And that we gave them all the information. They showed gave all our income, and the judge looked at all this data that just people are making, a good living, and then all of them hit 45, and it goes like this. And she said to them, "You guys better settle, because I don't need to see anything else." And they settled out, and we all made a certain amount of money. I made, I don't know, 60, 70 grand or something, which is nice, but that's not going to take you to 60.
No.
Age 60. So
did any work result from that? Like in terms of any behavioral changes? No.
There was some, pro forma stuff.
Sure.
But they didn't do anything. It was no different. But of course, by that point, the business was starting to change. And, streaming was not yet a thing, but, cable was changing things. And
right.
Streaming would soon change it even more. So I shifted into animation at that point, which doesn't really care most of the time. They couldn't care less how old you are.
Right.
Because they don't see you, most of the time. And you're not fronting the show. Even the showrunner, most of the time in animation, isn't somebody that the public's ever going to see. So they don't care how old you are. I was going to
say, in those sitcom days, everyone is together. I mean, at least in my head, you have the set right there. You have the writers, the table read. There's producers attending. There's the actors. But in animation, you're everything is compartmentalized.
Yeah,
you're lucky if the writers are together in a room.
That's right.
You're in a different building than the executives.
Well, on the productions in Ireland or
overseas,
South Korea or India or someplace.
You have time zone differences and so, for better or for worse, that's just the way animation is.
That's the way it is.
Just going back for a second, when you said that your writing partner was tired of the business at the time that he decided he was done, but why do you think that you still you had that fire at that time?
That is a great question that I cannot answer. I should get in therapy and have my therapist answer it. But I can go back to partly desperation. I can't do anything else. And I had to support a family. And it was partly, though, it really was, Hollywood is a place for dreamers. If you don't, even at my crotchety old age, if I sit down to start a new spec screenplay, I have to think, this one's going to get made and this one's going to be great. Or a pilot, this is going to be great. If you don't have that, stop. Move aside, let somebody else take a shot at it. And I always had that. I always, I love good work. whether even if I don't do it. One of the reasons I do the YouTube channel is precisely for that. It's completely free. I don't charge anything. I just want to see better movies. I just love seeing good films, and good pilots, and good work, and so I want to help people get there, and I always like that. I just want to do good work. The money is great if you're working, but that was never my motivation. It was always I love the medium. I love when something works. When a really well told story in film, it blows you away.
It is interesting, like, especially when you're just pitching jokes and something lands, you can feel when it's the right thing.
Yeah.
I mean, because there's no other way to measure it. You can't measure comedy or whatever, but it's like, if it feels right, you're like, ooh, yeah. And you get a little excited by it.
Oh,
and
absolutely.
That goes in and it's a little bit better, a little bit better.
I can remember many times driving home from rewrite night, usually in a typical sitcom, table read Monday, then you do a run through on Tuesday, and then Tuesday night was the big rewrite night. And so the run through would start around 5 and maybe be over 6:30. You get your notes from whoever, and then 7 o'clock maybe you start working, and so you got to order in dinner. By the time you get done, it's often 2, 3 in the morning, normally. And I can remember driving home from Paramount or Warner's or wherever I was working, 3 o'clock in the morning, and I got kids, and I'm buzzed. I never got into drugs because there was no high compared to sitting in a room with the funniest people in the world for 4 or 5 hours, and you just come home flying. It was great.
Yeah.
I mean, it's exhausting.
Yeah.
And it wears you out after a while. But my God, I'm so honored and glad I had an opportunity to do that for so many years. And I wish to God somehow I had tapes of some of those rewrite sessions, because you'd never laugh so much in your life. Funniest people in the world.
Yeah, yeah. And then when now it's like the mid 90s and you're starting to see the writing on the wall, you yourself are like, maybe this is good for me too, to make a transition.
Yeah.
How do you decide on animation? Where does that come from? How do you even know it's a thing?
Exactly. It was a pure chance.
Yeah.
I had friends, a wonderful writing team, Andrew Nichols and Daryl Vickers, they'd been Carson's head writers for the last 5 or 6 years of his run on The Tonight Show. They'd done sitcoms for a while. And they were like me, it's like the doors had closed. They were roughly my age, a little younger, but the doors had closed for them in sitcoms. And so they somehow knew somebody who knew somebody, and they were writing these episodes or story editing, this Swedish cartoon series called The World of Tosh, which I guess is based on some iconic Swedish cartoon or comic books or something. I don't know what the hell it is. And they said, you want to write these, I had no work. I mean, I needed work. We'd done this lawsuit, but I needed to find some way to make a living. I had started teaching, but it's tough to make a living at that. And so they said, you want to write these cartoons? They're like, a fraction, like a fourth of what you'd get for the same. It was a half-hour cartoon. A half-hour comedy would have been 4 times more in the sitcom world, but it's better than nothing. So, and at that point, I had also started to work with a new partner, Steve Sullivan, just to shake things up, and we were trying to get back into live action. He'd been a sitcom writer, but the doors were closed, and it was very hard. And so suddenly we had this opportunity to write a cartoon series. Why not? Nobody's ever going to see, as far as I know, no one I ever met has ever seen The World of Tosh, but I think I wrote 6 of them. And they paid, and that was the beginning. And then we took that, and in animation, I guess my agent has gotten me a few jobs, but it's mostly word of mouth.
It's a smaller community, right?
I don't know. I guess it's not. If you consider international, it's a bigger community.
Well, I guess that's true.
But in LA, it's a smaller community,
right?
And so people hire you. They hire people they like, who are their friends, and
yeah,
that's just how it works. You're a story editor sometimes, and in
it's
animation, head writer. In live action, story editor is a low-level staff writer. But in animation, it's a head writer, and so I've been a story editor, I've been a staff writer, I've been a freelancer. You just do what's available.
That's
And-
the writing career.
yeah, and so we wrote. Oh my God, we wrote all kinds of weird international things. That's the other thing. People in the mainstream Hollywood, they don't know about animation at all, and they certainly don't know about international animation, which is way under the radar, but it pays exactly the same.
And did you come to fall in love with that genre?
Oh yeah, and when I was a kid, I loved cartoons.
Yeah.
I liked the ones of my generation, of course, but
A little more edgy back then.
oh my God, the Warner Brothers cartoons, the great classic Chuck Jones Warner
Yeah.
Brothers cartoons. You couldn't do any of them now.
You know, I remember as a kid sometimes when I would watch those, and I would realize later that, oh, this show doesn't have any talking. That's how I said it. Right. But like, it's, you know, you watch Rugrats, whatever, and those are amazing shows. But I remember certain, like, you know, any Wile E. Coyote, Roadrunner, they don't talk.
They don't talk.
And for the longest time, I did not notice that. And that's just the power of storytelling.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
there's no talking here. And then once I noticed it, it felt weird, but then
Yeah.
it would go away again and
Yeah.
you're just watching the thing. But there's a lot of, yeah. And that's just,
And of course, I loved the classic Disney stuff. I was very much a Disney kid. I loved all that stuff. I don't know if I ever told you this story, Brandon, but I had a brief flirtation with animation back when I was a live action writer. Knew nothing, no interest in it, never been approached to write it. And there was a writer's strike in 1988. Major writer's strike, WGA. Well, animation writing is not covered by and large under the WGA, which I didn't know. And my agent at the time called up in the middle of the strike and said, "You want to do a Disney animated feature?" I said, "Well, I can't do that. I'm on strike." He said, "No, this isn't covered. It's legal. You can do it." Okay. So my partner and I went to Disney Feature Animation, which at that time was a little Quonset hut over there, where across the street on Sonora where we used to work. It was just a little hut with one guy named Chuck something and a secretary, and that was Disney Feature Animation. And he said, "Look, we're going to start in a couple of months. We're releasing this movie called The Little Mermaid, and we think it's going to be a big hit. And we're gearing up to do one of these a year, and the next one's going to be Beauty and the Beast. And then after that, we're going to do this. We just have an idea, just a title called The Lion King. We don't know what the story is. So if you guys can go off and come up with some story for The Lion King, that'd be great." Okay. So we went off and we came back with a story for The Lion King. It wasn't anything like what they wound up doing. It was a cute story, but it wasn't anything like that. And so we pitched it to him, and he said, "Nah, it's not what I want. But if you have anything else." And then I think we were literally walking out the door, and I said, "Well, we're kicking around this other idea called Pygmalion. It's Pygmalion with a pig. So it's barnyard characters, and the chicken lays eggs, the cow gives milk, the horse pulls the plow, but the pig just disappears every fall and we never see him again." So everybody's falling in love with this pig, and they're trying to find a way to save the pig. And so they see the bulldog in the farmhouse, and he gets to walk around with a collar and everything. He's an English bulldog. He said, "Let's get the bulldog to teach the pig how to be a dog, and then they won't kill the pig." And so it was Pygmalion. It was My Fair Lady with a pig. And he said, He bought it right in the room, just like that. And then we go to make a deal, again, knowing nothing about animation. And our agent calls up and says, "You're not going to believe this," but they said, "Negotiations begin and end with half of your last feature quote." So it was like, I think that those days my last feature quote had been $50,000 or something. So it's like $25,000 divided by 2 minus 10%. So this is ridiculous. So we sold Disney the story, and they still own it. It's in their vault somewhere. Wow. But then this was before Babe, and then Babe came out. And it was very similar, and so, but that was my first brush with animation.
Wow. Yeah. Unknowingly, Disney was about to enter its like 90s golden era of features.
Yeah.
Starting with Little Mermaid.
Well, unknown to me, they had an idea that this was going to work, and it certainly did. And I can remember taking my daughter to see Little Mermaid when it first came out. It was just like her eyes were as big as Ariel's.
Yeah.
'Cause it was so exciting to see a cartoon on the big screen again.
Wow. And when you went back to put something together for The Lion King,
yeah,
how did you approach that? Because by then, do you have any experience in even like the kids genre at that point doing?
No, but it's
the same tools, right?
Yeah, it's just you're telling a story.
Yeah.
I knew what cartoons were. So yeah, but it was a very different story. It was about a mouse. Ours was about a mouse who scares an elephant and thinks that because that's the joke. Mice are
Right.
elephants are afraid of mice. So he scares them. No, I must be really strong and powerful and tough. And so he goes out into the jungle to be the king of the jungle. And then the word travels through the jungle to the Lion King, says, "Oh no, I'm the king of the jungle." And so the mouse is squaring off with this lion. It's a very cute story.
That's great.
But it wasn't what they wanted. It wasn't Hamlet, which is what they wanted.
It wasn't Hamlet, right.
Let's get this Shakespeare guy to do it instead.
But I love that. That's a great pitch.
It was a cute story, and he admitted it was a cute story. It just wasn't what they wanted.
That's great. That's
great. It's yours. Take it.
I'm going to take. Yeah,
it's yours, Brandon. If you want it.
Well, I'm curious. Just on that note, and having now worked with executives in animation, executives in live action, what's something that you wish more executives understood about writers, and what's something that you think writers should understand better about executives?
Boy, I'm the wrong person for the second part of that question.
I thought maybe.
My theory is if there were a new strain of COVID that only affected development executives and made it so they couldn't go to work for 6 months, nothing would change except everything would get better. So that's mean, and I probably shouldn't say it, but I don't care anymore. Executives don't have a genuine love and appreciation of the creative process, whether it comes from a writer or from a director or an actor. But let's face it, we're the ones who start with a blank page. So when we create something, it's special. It's magic when it works. And they don't have any appreciation of that, by and large. Some of them do, I'm sure. But what they ought to be doing is finding talent and grooming talent and then riding the coattails of that talent and taking it to the top, not dictating to us what should be done. There's another brush with animation, Disney. Years later, I get called in to Disney. It's called Disney. I forget what they would call it, but they used to do DVD versions, like half-hour, little like. And so they wanted to do Beauty and the Beast Belle stories, right? Little half-hour things. They would package 3 of them in a DVD, like a sort of a movie. So we get called in by the executives saying, "We've been working on this here in-house," meaning the executives, for like 6 months, and we haven't been able to quite crack it. Here's what we've got. And it's like 3 pages of gibberish, just junk. See if you guys can come up with anything. Well, we're professional writers. We're creative for a living. We go home. 3 days later, we come back with 6 great stories, all written out. And they, wow, this is great. Now, they shut down that division before they had a chance to produce them, but we sold them all. It's just, being creative, that ability to create something special out of nothing that's the business. That's storytelling. That's the magic that makes it work. It's not any of the rest of it. It's not moving furniture around. It's not exploiting brands. It's not buying brands. It's that. And so the lack of respect, not for the person, because writers can be just as big a jackasses as anybody, but a respect for that creative impulse, that's not present in most of their dealings. They look at writers and they look at creators as just sort of being something they have to deal with, as opposed to...
As a means to get to...
Yeah, as a means for them to package something that will sell to their boss, which will make another lousy movie or a lousy show, as opposed to, give me somebody who comes in with something fresh. And you can see evidence of it once in a while. Early Pixar, that's what... that first 10 years of Pixar, when they never had a flop, that's what they were doing. Mm-hmm. They weren't exploiting a pre-existing IP. They were creating brand new shows out of stardust, and audiences flocked to it. Mm-hmm. You see it periodically. Golden era of HBO, the same thing. It isn't that hard to do. AMC had a few years where they just hired good people and let them. Here's your budget. Go do something interesting. And they did. They came back with Breaking Bad and Walking Dead and Orange is the New Black and these excited Mad Men, these shows that other networks wouldn't touch because they were talented people doing interesting work. And that's what the audience wants to see. They don't want us to see recycled junk that some executive came up with.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. But just looking at how long your career was and is, but what about playing that the game of politics with executives? Because you can't push back on everything.
You can't talk like I do.
Right.
I can only do this because I'm semi-retired and I don't care. But no, I had to learn how to not do that. I was not good at it, but I was competent at it. And I worked well with other creative people. I worked well with actors, but not necessarily with stars. I never got over my intimidation of stars, which is a flaw in my character. But I worked. I wasn't particularly good with executives. I was okay. And I think probably my lack of respect for what they do, not necessarily them, but for their job, came through, and they sensed it. And I was never, I didn't have like it would have been smarter if I'd had a champion, if I'd had an executive who championed me within a given, Fox or Paramount or someplace. And I never really had that.
Huh. But just to go back on your awe over stars, I mean, thinking of Archie Bunker's place, that didn't seem to stop you there.
Yeah, but it was hard. And I was never comfortable. I didn't hang out with Carol.
Right.
I mean, I was never that.
You could work.
I could work with him, but I could never be a buddy. And some people could. I mean, there were writers and the smarter, better, not better writers, but better at the politics. They did do that. They would find a star actor, find a star producer, somebody to be their mentor, and they would ride their coattails to the top. I never really had that.
How has your definition of success changed over the years from now versus when you were starting out?
Yeah. Well, when I came out here, I didn't have any thoughts of having a house and a family. And as soon as you start a family and buy a house, everything changes. It's like the guy who I wouldn't work on that show is I work on that show.
Yeah,
it's funny how that changes.
Yeah, a new baby in a house. That's me. Within the last couple of years, right?
Yeah. So it's very easy for me where I am now. I have a nice house. My kids are grown. I'm comfortable. I have good pensions with the Writers Guild and the Animation Guild.
Yeah.
I guess the one thing I really, really learned was I would sometimes get talked into things, usually by my agent. Say, well, yeah, I know this isn't very good, but if you can get it through the first season, if you can salvage it, you'll be a big hero. And I would always fall for that bait, and you never were. So if you worked on a show that wasn't particularly good, even if you took it from lousy to mediocre, by the end of it, they just said, oh, well, that show was mediocre. We don't want that guy. He's on the mediocre show. Right. But when I was younger, it would have been better served to be a little more particular about what I worked on, so that I try to get on a Cheers, try to get on a Frasier, try to get on a Mad About You, Everybody Loves Raymond, whatever it was. If you get on one of those chic credits, you could go right to the top. And I was always working on shows that were pretty good, but rarely one that was better than that.
But is there a way you can tell that? I guess you can't, especially when a show's starting out.
Well, when you're starting out,
it's tough to.
It's tough. But no, you can usually tell.
Yeah. I mean, you probably
you can kind of tell. You can watch a pilot of Cheers and say, okay, that's special. But some of them get better and they fool you, but not usually.
Yeah.
And again, it wasn't like I was working on total junk.
No.
Well, sometimes I was.
I mean, we've all had things.
Yeah, but they were never. They were always pretty good shows, and so it just became assumed, and I understand it as like, oh well, he's a pretty good writer. He works on pretty good shows. Whereas I think I'm a really good writer who was working on pretty good shows, and I can honestly say I think I made every show I ever worked on a little bit better for having been on it, and my episodes usually were among the better ones, and I tried to whatever it was, try to push it up a little bit. But those subtleties get lost when people just look at your resume. And
This is something I ask every guest.
Yeah.
I think this one is right up your alley. It's called the rule I break. Every industry has rules.
Yeah.
Some are there for a reason, and some are just begging to be broken. So what's a rule in your field that you don't follow or believe in?
The rule I break is that there are rules. Because there are so many rules, especially in screenwriting. There's so many screenwriting books and television too. Rules about what you have to do, where you have to be. You're page so-and-so, you have to be so-and-so. Throw all that out. I try to teach when I do teach, and I've had success with people who've had success who've been my students, I try to teach organic storytelling. The rules exist for a reason. They exist because they have a tendency to work. But that's not the same as saying you need to always follow the rules. So every rule should be looked on with skepticism. What is its reason for being there? And the example I would often use is, the act breaks, 3-act structure in films. And at this point, you're supposed to, the first act should always do this, second act should always do that. And I would use Psycho as an example, which is the end of Act 1 is the protagonist is killed. Now, Psycho's a gigantically successful film, completely influenced horror films, still does. The reason why the protagonist is killed at the end of Act 1 is because Alfred Hitchcock and Joseph Stefano, who wrote it, were trying to make the scariest movie ever made, and they came up with this brilliant idea. What if we killed the protagonist at the end of Act 1, and then the audience would have no idea who's going to survive? Everybody's up for grabs, and they cast a movie star, Janet Leigh, in the role to make it really effective. And it worked great. But if I said to you, you want to write a horror movie, always kill the protagonist at the end of Act 1, that would be stupid. Likewise, 30 years later, the Coen brothers are doing Fargo, and they say to themselves, it'd be fun. Seems like it would be a fun idea for a movie. We created this kind of crazy, complex, misbegotten crime gone wrong. So complicated. And then suddenly we bring in this small town sheriff who slowly starts to pick apart the clues and figure out what happened. Wouldn't that be fun to watch? Yeah, it would be fun to watch. So because of that, they introduced the protagonist at the end of Act 1. So Act 1 is just crazy, nutty scheme gone wrong. In comes Frances McDormand, and then begins Act 2. Well, likewise, if I said you should always introduce your protagonist at the end of Act 1, that would be crazy, but worked for them. So what is your intent? What is your goal? What is the reason? What are you trying to accomplish with this film? And then make the rules work for you. Throw out the ones that don't work for you. In this case, nobody, Robert McKee's not going to write a rule saying you should always introduce your protagonist at the beginning of Act 2. So that's a rule. I'm going to throw it out. It doesn't work for me, for my intent. I had a screenwriter friend who had a great line. He said, the rules of screenwriting are should be for when the script doesn't work. So you've written the script. It isn't working. Go back and look at the rules. Is there a rule I can apply that will make this script work better? As opposed to starting with rules, because if you start with rules, you're just overwhelmed.
You have 3 words, right, that you say are the most important in every.
What happens next?
Yes,
That's it.
That's the structure.
Yeah.
If you're asking, if
the audience is going, what happens next?
What's going to happen next?
It doesn't matter. You got it. You nailed it.
Yeah.
And usually, I write organically. I do know what the end of Act 1 is. I do know what the end of Act 2 is. I rarely think about the midpoint, but it's always there. And even before that first script that I wrote, that first screenplay that I wrote, before I'd taken any classes or barely had taken any, I didn't know what I was doing. I was just going on instinct. And I did 1,000 rewrites of it, but the structure was always there. I always had 3 acts. I just didn't know what they were. It was a midpoint, didn't know what it was. I was just doing what felt right, which is what creative people do. They follow their feelings.
Yeah, that brings up an interesting contrast, because when you years ago went to the downtown library in Birmingham, you got one book on television writing, and you probably had to dust it off, and it was a little technical and this and that. Now there's a genre of screenwriting books. Is there something where, it's like this, it has to feed an industry where if we're saying that there are rules to screenwriting, then that must mean you need books to learn what those rules are, right? Like, did you ever talk about rules in storytelling back in those sitcom days?
No. No. We knew generally what we were.
Were there ever any books around of like?
There may have been, but nobody read them.
Yeah.
We all knew it was going to be 22 minutes. We knew that the script had to be roughly 45 pages. We knew that there was a commercial break in the middle, which we called Act 1, Act 2. And therefore that commercial break meant that the end of Act One had to be a cliffhanger to keep people to come back from the commercial break.
Yeah.
This is back when people watch commercials.
Yeah.
But
So
that
you
was
had to write to the commercial.
But that was it. I mean, other than that, you're just trying to tell a good story. And I noticed, every writer's room I'm in, I noticed that with the one word you probably hear more than any other is feel. That doesn't feel right. No, it feels like that's too soon. I think it feels like it would be more effective if we learned that later. We're going by instinct, by feel. Yes, there's a structure, but that's not, if you're writing to the structure, you're dead. If it's going to be exciting and fun and interesting, whether it's a cartoon for kids or whether it's a sitcom or whether it's a movie, that's what you're trying to do. You're trying to use the part of your brain that feels first. And then afterwards, that felt really good, but now I apply the other part of my brain, the thinking part of my brain, and say, but now that I look at it, I think it's too late. I think we should have put that earlier. But you have to do it that way. Feel, then think, not think, then feel. Those screenwriting books are telling you to think, then feel. Here's the template. Now you just stick in some feelings, and it doesn't work. I read scripts constantly, as a consultant or whatever. And I can tell when it's been written to the template of one of those screenwriting books. Because it's like, I don't want that. I didn't want to see that scene. What's it there for? Oh, well, I was trying to get to the midpoint.
Before we go, I like to do a rapid fire round.
Oh, good.
5 questions.
Yeah.
Say as much or as little as you want. What was the last book you read?
I can't remember the title, but it's about Edgar Allan Poe.
Oh, nice. What's
The Man in the Crowd, sorry.
The Man in the Crowd.
Yeah.
Was it about him?
Man of the Crowd.
Was it a fiction or was it about
It's
his
fiction.
Fiction. Recommend it?
It's okay.
It's okay.
I'm a Poe. I'm an Edgar Allan Poe nut, so I'm a bad gauge of that.
Yeah. What's a movie you love to rewatch?
Oh my God, there's so many. But I would say the one I probably watch more than any is Notorious. Alfred Hitchcock. Notorious from 1946. It's one of those, there's a handful of them. It's a perfect movie. It's just perfect. There's nothing wrong with it.
If it wasn't this, what's another career field you could see yourself in?
I truly, I would not be happy. I don't think I'd be happy in any other career that I've ever seen. At one point when I was younger, I thought I wanted to be a marine biologist, and then I took chemistry, and okay, I don't want to do that. But that seemed very, very.
What about
romantic.
marine biology? That attracted you?
Oh, I don't know. It just seemed romantic. They used to have those TV specials about Jacques Cousteau.
Oh, yes.
And it just seemed really great. You're on this ship and your boat, and you're going around to exotic locations and looking for cool fish. That seemed
like the Life Aquatic.
Yeah. It was a Life Aquatic before that. But I would have been good at everything except the science.
Right. Yeah. Over for the science.
I did want to be a cartoonist, which is similar.
Yeah.
I could have imagined that. I was pretty good at single panel cartoons, but I'm not a particularly gifted artist. I'm okay, but it takes me forever to execute drawings, and so I quickly decided I think I'll skip the drawing part and just go to the jokes.
I meet a lot of writers that way. I started off drawing.
Oh, did you?
In drawing comic books.
Yeah.
And then, but only ever got mediocre.
Yes.
And felt it.
Yes.
And then
That's exactly
along the way, fell in love with film, screenwriting, and was like, hey, I could write pictures instead of draw them.
That's exactly what happened to me. It's like, this is a lot of work to get that. Really? That's it?
Yes. Worst piece of advice you've ever received?
Oh, wow. Well, I think I already said it. I think it was, do this lousy project and you'll be a hero. And now I realize it was agents trying to talk me into doing a job nobody else wanted to do.
But they would get commission and the income.
And that's right.
It's not for career growth.
There's your job is to get your clients working. I get it, but that never worked for me. I would save a project and then I would get no credit for it.
Best piece of advice you've ever received?
I didn't receive it directly, but interestingly, it came from Woody Allen. My late partner, the first guy I worked with, was a journalist in his early, before he came out here to be a TV writer or comedy writer. And he, in his early days, a journalist interviewed Woody Allen when Woody Allen was he was more than, I think he maybe had just made Play It Again, Sam. So he was on his way up. He hadn't done Annie Hall or any of those classic movies yet, but he was on his way up. and he interviewed him, and he played me the tape, and it was so weird to hear his actual voice. And like most comedians, most funny people, when he's talking about his art, craft, they're not funny at all. It's very serious. And at one point, my partner asked him, would you have career advice for somebody who wants to do what you do? And he thought for a long time, and then I heard him say, never slough anything off. Meaning, I don't know if he expounded on it, but I think he did a little bit. Meaning, no matter what you're doing, if it's in a professional form, if you're getting paid $100, whatever it is, never slough it off. Do your best work, because you never know who's going to read it. And that thing that you thought was not, whatever, some executive you never met may read it and love it, and 5 years later it may help you out. And that happened to me when I wrote my partner and I wrote the pilot for Herman's Head, and we originally sold it to ABC, and it was a really good piece of work. They didn't shoot it. 7 years later, the woman who got put in charge of Fox, at that time Fox Network was kind of a new thing, and she said, the first season or two, they'd failed with these kind of run-of-the-mill sitcoms. We need to do something different, something special. What was that thing I read? Herman's Head, that thing that took place in a guy's head? Yeah. Let's see if let's dig that up and do that. Boom. 7 years later.
Wow.
So, never slough anything off.
You can not predict a call like that.
You can, and the people who are reading your work, whether it's a script or a one-page pitch, the people who you never know who's reading it. Mm-hmm. They may pass it to somebody who passes it to somebody who passes it to somebody. You never know. So, an assistant may read it and love it. The boss hates it, but the assistant winds up getting promoted. And now, you know what? That thing I read 3 years ago. So never, ever do anything less than your best work, no matter what the project is.
That's brilliant advice. Andy, this was such a pleasure.
Oh.
I alluded to earlier, but we met on Robogobo.
Yes.
And you took over as head writer in season 1, and then wanted out, and I took over at season 2, which was an incredible experience. And you were gracious enough to stay with us in the writer's room for story breaks, table reads, the whole season. And everybody loved you in the room. And nice. I remember we'd be, get as head writer getting a lot of pitches, and you're trying to punch things up, and I could just look over at you, and you would either kind of shrug or just nod, yeah, that's the right move.
Oh, did I do that?
You would do that.
I didn't mean to.
I think that works. And I would look at you, and you would just nod, and yeah, we're good. So you just had such a great presence, and
well, thank you. That's very nice to hear. There were people in my life who were veteran writers who were exactly the same way, and I felt in those days, veteran writers were treated a little better, I guess. Not that you mistreated me, but I mean, and I have to say that was a fine experience, and I was thrilled to have that sort of opportunity to still be in a writer's room.
Yeah,
that's where I'm most comfortable. I spent an enormous amount of my adult life in a writer's room. I loved it. I enjoyed all of it.
Yeah. Well, once again, this was just amazing and to talk to you, and thank you for coming on and sharing your story. Hey, before you go, thank you for listening. If something in this episode moved you or even made you pause for a second, please consider following the show, leaving a review, and signing up for the weekly newsletter at storyseriespodcast.com. That's where I share my personal takeaways from each episode, what stuck with me and why, one story at a time. See you in the next one.